Hey folks, welcome into the BN Cubs Podcast. I'm Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami, here to talk Cubs. Thanks as always to our sponsors at Ankin Law, 3126 million, injury law made personal. Mike, let's, as we were
Mike,
talking off. Yeah, Mike. I was going with Mike because then I was going to say Mike because I was going to say we're talking off Mike. I don't know. I think I thought I was going to be able to put something together quickly in my head about with Mike, and
I called you on it immediately.
Yeah, you jumped in. Huh? It was not going to happen anyway. So this was better anyway. No, we were talking off mic about how this time of the offseason is always tricky in terms of what you're going to dig into topic wise, whether on a podcast or for even content purposes, because the real meat of free agency and trade season and all that is really still more than a month away. We'll get the technical opening once the World Series concludes, but then you've got options decisions, you've got qualifying offers, You've got the tender deadline, which is now, by the way, it's in November. It used to always be December, which held things up even further. And so
Rule 5 draft stuff and
the rostering deadline. It's all good stuff. I like all that stuff, but it makes for this kind of discussion on October 23rd a little tricky.
Well, this actually kind of leads into the one offseason thought that I did want to bring up.
Oh, well, good. Do that right now. But I just wanted to, I guess, amplify that I'm not saying we don't have good stuff to talk about for the podcast listeners. Only because we do. Only that when we were talking off mic, it's all right, we got to think a little harder about what we're going to get into. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you have something, Michael.
No, I do have one thing, and it's it's hard to it's not hard to put into words, but it's hard to know if I'm missing something. It feels as though, this time of the year, there's always nothing going on yet, like you said, because we're still pre-World Series even beginning. So we're not there yet. I do feel as though
there's no FBI raid with the mafia happening to touch Major League Baseball
in baseball. Yet. Emmanuel Class A, I guess, has his thing going on.
We'll see if there's some mafia ties there that emerge.
That would be exciting. You're getting a little, as an Italian American, I'm taking your excitement over the inclusion of mafia. You're a little too excited.
Listen, that is only the the editor in me where I'm like, all right, there's some angles here. Here.
No. So here's what I was going to say is, doesn't it feel as though we are, here's what it is. Now I found the way in, the entry point. And this might even be an article that I write later today. This is the Bleacher Nation editorial workshop podcast brought to you by Ankin Law. So when the Dodgers article about how they might be interested in Kyle Tucker this offseason came out, I feel as though the last few years there have been Cubs rumors like that start sometime around the end of August.
Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
And then there's a little in September. And then when the season ends, there's at least one thing where hey, it might be this guy this year is who they're, know, and there hasn't really been that. I don't think it's because the Cubs aren't going to sign anyone or they're not going to I don't think I'm not making that argument at all. I just feel as though there's a distinct lack of, I'm, keep an eye on the Cubs and insert player X this offseason.
Yep. Good call. Right? Because Tucker was, I remember there's starting to be chit chat about that in late August, September-ish about Tucker.
And you could go back. There's a bunch of those.
Yeah. And that's been true other years. So that's a great point. And it's interesting. I mean, part of it, I suppose, is something we've talked about before, that the Cubs have not a lot of obvious openings. Mm-hmm. But you know what it's going to be? And I bet this will emerge soon. Is some of the pitchers that we were talking about in July as possible Cubs targets in trade. I think that stuff's going to start to surface again.
That's a good call
because those are conversations that should happen. And we know, so the Cubs need to add starting pitching, and we know, they prefer, all else equal, to keep those shorter term if possible. And one way to do that is to have trade talks on cost controlled guys. They did it last year with Luzardo, which didn't, end up coming to fruition. But yeah, it would not surprise me. Mackenzie Gore, Edward Cabrera, Sandy Alcantara, Joe Ryan. Those were the four that we talked about.
And with the exception of Joe Ryan, the other three trade value kind of went down, arguably, right?
I think Alcantara started performing well down the stretch.
I gotta look.
Yeah.
You know what? This is an article too.
The reason I know this, yeah, it is. You're right. It is. And the reason I know he improved a bit is because I've thought about taking a little bit of a victory lap when I was saying, the Cubs really because remember he was struggling, and I'm like, yeah, but he's coming back, and he might still turn it on, and he's one of the few guys who can give you 7+ innings. That ultimately, with all those guys, this is not a relitigation of the trade deadline. Because, again, none of them were traded. And when the reports came out, seemingly confirmed with a wink by Jed Hoyer about what those teams were looking for in trade, it was egregious. You're not trading Matt Shaw and Cade Horton for those guys. And in hindsight, it would have been even worse. That might have been
for only Mackenzie Gore, for what it's worth. I feel like we get a blanket. He gets a... I'm not
Joe Ryan's
getting
better, though.
And Joe. But, there's no way the Marlins were asking for Cade Horton and Matt Shaw. There weren't.
Maybe, but I'm only saying they weren't traded. So
yeah,
it's not just, then the Cubs weren't the only suitor. So it means that the price tags were very high.
Those are all interesting.
So yeah, I can see that stuff coming back up. So.
That makes sense. I do have a hard time imagining the Cubs pulling off another pricey trade after doing it last winter. But if you're getting a guy for more than one season, that neutralizes it a little bit. And if you absolutely, I'm not suggesting, I'll even include another name that I don't think will happen, but to illustrate my point without offending our listeners, if you have to trade someone like Matt Shaw or Miguel Amaya, maybe it opens up opportunities in free agency that were not otherwise visible, because they're like, well, it's so full up. How are you going to do this? Or Owen Casey, or you're like, so then there is more of an opening at right field or DH or whatever. And maybe that sort of kills two birds with one stone. You get a pitcher that you're looking to acquire, and then you open up the opportunity for your front office to go spend in free agency. And in a way, you're getting two good players then, two contributors immediately, as opposed to banking on a prospect and signing a pitcher or whatever.
Especially if you regard 2026 as a uniquely important year for competitive purposes, both because of the lockout that could come after, but also because of things that Michael has written about, that they've got a lot of guys that are there for 2026 and then some questions after that.
I had a Brett thought the other day. Is winning next year more, less, or the same important but hear me out. If you're the World Series winning team, but then the following season is partly canceled, isn't that going to eat into your expected World Series earnings because of increases in season ticket holders, merchandise? All that stuff is a big reason. That's not the reason why you should want to win the World Series. But that is undoubtedly something to that, right? Or does it not matter?
So I could argue it cuts two ways. Because on the one hand, yes, everything you're saying is correct. That you win the World Series, you win the World Series, and then a month later, everything shuts down and everybody is mad. Well, they're not buying your jerseys and they're not renewing season tickets, and there's a sting that goes into what you just accomplished. Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately outweighs the second part, which is if that next season is dinged significantly, that will reduce the value of winning that year, 2027, and it kind of extends the life of having won the most recent full season.
And you know what else? Why I'm dumb. You will make more money by winning the World Series, and then that goes into your coffers to help tide you over when 2027 is lost, right? So you'd rather have maximum playoff revenue the last full year, and then
Sure.
save,
All else
bank
equal.
all that.
Right. Like if you're asking me today, Cubs can win 2026 or they can win whatever 2027 is. I'm taking 2026 without question.
But or I guess, I mean, do you think Tom Ricketts feels as though he'll make more? Like, there's just no reason. I guess
They're
it's
all, I'm sure
yeah,
they're all thinking exactly what your question was to set this up. They're all thinking, okay, if we do win it in 2026, how do we quickly maximize the value?
Yeah, right. That's the way to think about it. And that's what they'll do.
Yeah. Okay. So,
that was our freestyle entry.
Yeah,
intro.
that was good. No real transition from this other than you wrote something else that I thought was really interesting this week at bleachernation.com, Chicago sports website. Check it out. You wrote about Dansby Swanson and his performance with the Cubs in these first 3 years, the contract he signed with the Cubs, and just sort of how you evaluate that performance. And I don't want to just rehash what you wrote, so folks go read that piece. It's thoughtful and enjoyable, but it did make me think generally about how we talk about long-term deals, and we're heading into an offseason. And so this topic comes up a lot, and it's this sort of marriage of the total guarantee, the number of years, the AAV, how it relates to the luxury tax, aging curves, level of competitiveness of the team, and what you're ultimately, they all point to the same thing, which is like, what are you trying to accomplish when you sign? Who's a big free agent this offseason that the Cubs might, pursue that's going to get a huge contract? Like, we can be extreme that it's, Alex Bregman. Let's go there.
Alex Bregman is
yeah. Let's say, Bregman was going to get I don't think he will, but let's say he was going to get Swanson deal, 7 years and $177 million. And that, let's say the Cubs are doing that now. I think the way you would evaluate that contract slightly different than the Swanson one, because he was 3 years younger at the time. The team was a little more transitional at the time than they are right now. Mm-hmm. And I think you would evaluate where you got the value of that Bregman deal differently than you did when you were looking at Swanson and you were like, was this a successful season? Yes. Was this a successful season? Yes. I think with any team that's signing Bregman right now, it's going to be weighted very heavily toward what do you get in 2026 specifically when he's 32 or so. And you're going to need you're going to need a full third of the WAR, maybe half of the WAR of the, value of that deal to come in that first season. And, last thing, and then I'm going to kick it to you, is what we have not seen from the Cubs of pretty much the Tom Ricketts era. And I'm not saying it's him doing it. I'm just saying Epstein, Hoyer. We have not seen a lot of those deals where they are signed with long-term with an explicit understanding that you're going to have to get the value in those first 2 years. And then it's like dead money. Now, like Jason Hayward ended up being that, but he was 26. That was not the point of that deal. We've seen very few like that, if any.
Yeah, no, you're right. And just to give people a little bit of context who hadn't read it, what I did is I went back and I knew that they had this at Fangraphs, but at the time of Swanson signing his deal, they did one of those things where they projected his contract telling the computer, project out his next 6 seasons and then estimate a contract based on these projections. And the contract that they spit out, I mean, it's almost hilarious because it's the snake eating its tail, was $800,000 off. They had $176.2 million versus which all that really means is that Zips was at the time similar to the Ivy system,
right? To the model the Cubs were using.
That's the same thing. And so I liked using that though. And some people in the comment section were even like, well, there's updated project. I was like, I know, but I wanted to say like, this is what the Cubs were expecting to get because the value is so identical. So these projections, not the contract, but the stats season by season are where what they were generally expecting. And to that end, for the first 3 seasons, he was like a little bit better offensively and overall in season 1. And it was like a solid win. The second year, the offense was a little down, but the defense was up. Last year, the offense was up and the defense was down a little bit in the advanced metrics. And so ultimately they were like at or above their expectations through the first 3 years of the deal. You're right though, that this is more of like you go along the way and he's providing the value that you expect. Whereas that's not, what a deal for. I'm trying to think of a good example too. I mean, maybe like what the Yankees did with Max Fried last year, kind
or
of like
whatever the team that signs Pete Alonso.
Sure.
His is going to be, I think, probably a great example of this,
because Swanson is probably a better bet to be like right at expectations year and year and year, where because so much of his value
and those expectations will they'll decline as he ages.
They go down, but meeting those is different than Alonso, who you're like, we're going to need you to hit 40 homers next year and 38 homers the year after that, and then you might hit 30 and 20, and then all of your value is gone because that's the only thing that you're doing for us.
Even though we signed you to a 7-year deal.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. But I will say that even the Swanson deal, the sort of conclusion I landed on was like, hey, this is working out pretty good. It's working out just fine. I know that's like, I also included this thought. It's like, sure, we kind of had a little bit of hope that maybe that last Braves season before he hopped over, where he popped up offensively a little, maybe he was going to take a step forward, and it hasn't been that. But
what stinks, by the way, he has been in such an extreme hard luck performer with the Cubs, where like I think this past season was his best, expected production season, and was not. No, it was like basically at league average.
And you want to know part of the reason I think that is, I don't mean this as an insult because it kind of works. How many of his home runs are in the basket at Wrigley?
Right.
So many.
Wrigley has been killed to right center.
Yeah, exactly. And if the wind had been just the opposite, he's already hitting 25 homers or whatever.
He could have had monster seasons.
He could have had and if you have a shortstop who's a Gold Glove shortstop, we all know his defense is Gold Glove caliber. It is. And he hits 32 homers. Well, it's suddenly like a little bit of a different story, right? Like, and it's not that dramatic of a leap to get there because so many of his homers are borderline ones. PCA or Michael Busch are hitting 415 foot blasts that maybe they should have been 425, but Swanson is at like 380, and it's like, well, that's either a fly out or a home run.
Right.
And
in the metrics that are being used to calculate expected production, the wind isn't really in there. And so it's
and we know Wrigley has been playing hard that way for literally the years that he's been here. Yeah. So it's, that's kind of is what it is, but.
Well, to button this combo, because I suppose that's all set up to, I don't foresee the Cubs changing in terms of looking at those deals. I don't think they're going to be like going aggressive. We can really use this guy in 2026, but he's going to take a 6-year deal. Let's do it and figure out the rest. Like, I just don't think that's going to change necessarily. But what it reminded me of is the Alfonso Soriano signing, which was like the quintessential one of those.
Perfect example.
And it was a deal that I've had to defend for years and years, because what people remember is how poorly he performed in the later years. And it's like, yeah, but that's not what that contract was. They signed him at 32 or whatever, gave him a huge contract because that's what it took to sign him. But it's because they wanted him those first 2 years when they were going all push.
And he was great. And they were great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was everything they hoped for, and then you just deal with the later on. And like, I think the current front office and ownership are just not into that, and we can debate.
Well, you want to know what's crazy is there's actually 2 levels of they're not into that, and the first one is they're not even doing the deals like that anymore. And the second one is what the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets and the Padres ish do. Which is once those deals get their value out of the first 2 years, they paper over it with more deals down the line. Right. So the Cubs are 2 rungs down to be on the record for that, because, they're signing Alfonso Soriano and then doing nothing because you have to, the amount.
You're like, sorry, we got
so high. 2007 and 08.
Yeah.
But then there's, the next step. So they should be doing both. They're doing neither as of now.
And I suppose what they would say is, since we're not going to do the papering over thing, it's better that we don't sign those types of contracts. And I think,
thank you.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because otherwise, I know. No, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that because then they can say, we sign guys like Dansby Swanson because we want to still get value in years 6 and 5, 6, whatever. Again, debatable, but if they're not, I don't know. The budget is the budget, and that's just the way it's going to be.
You know what I'm moderately concerned about, and it's not happening this year into next year because there's not a lot of roster turnover at the moment. But signing Matthew Boyd was great. Like, obviously that worked out really well. Right. But if the type of deals the Cubs are going to focus on are like sort of shorter term, but the high end of shorter term, which I think that they can clean up in, frankly, it's kind of like being the biggest fish in the smallest pond. If they're willing to do that, there's a way to do that. But it does lend itself to a lot less like longevity of, fandom for certain guys. And it's like, there's something about Dansby Swanson. Like, you go and you're like, I could buy a Dansby Swanson jersey right now. Right. Are you really going to buy a Matthew Boyd jersey? Like, he was great. And if he did, like, he was having an excellence, it's just, I don't know how much that matters. Maybe not at all. Maybe just winning is the only thing that matters. And maybe that's true, but I don't know. It's something about it. Sometimes it's like, I just want those things.
Yeah. And they would say that they want it too, but it's going to have to come from the Matt Shaws and the Pete Crow-Armstrongs and Michael Bushes, like guys that they bring along.
And there is a lot of that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there is. Sure. But next year's it's going to be a weird offseason, not only because of the CBA, though that'll be a big part of it, but for the Cubs specifically, who have so many people locked in for 2026 and so many not locked in thereafter. I don't know how you bridge that gap. It's going to be a weird offseason. And on top of everything, some of the guys that you might even consider trading have no trade clauses. So it's like, I don't know how they get around that. Do you want to get into Kyle Tucker at all?
Sure. I don't have, I know you
I just want to
wrote about it. Go ahead. I don't have a ton more to say on him until circumstances change. But
I know I want to I wrote an article after our podcast last week where I was kind of doing the whole like, man, that sucked. That season sucked to Kyle Tucker. Cause it was like a good thing to get off my chest and to see and to hear myself talking about, and then go, okay, hold on a second now. All of those things are true. Like, and also the Cubs can't just, we as Cubs fans can't just pretend that losing Kyle Tucker is like, good riddance. It's like, well, hold on. Like he stole 25 bases, hit 22 homers, whatever it was, had a 136 weighted runs created plus
5 WAR or something like that.
5 WAR. I know it didn't come in even enjoyable doses all the way, but that is not to say like, Jed Hoyer and Tom Ricketts should just be like, oh, whew, we don't have to sign that guy now. It's like, well, hold on. I mean, he's about to get a multiple $100 million contract in all likelihood. That's for a reason. And I guess I just didn't want to lose sight of that. So even if that is the end of that thought from my end, that's fine. But I did want to reiterate that I don't want our apathy to swing too far away where it's like, you don't want him on your team. You don't not want him on your team. You don't necessarily want him on your team for 10 years and 400 million, maybe, but that's a different story.
Well, there's a difference between recognizing a player's fit or not for a team in a given circumstance, given what the contract's going to be, given the rest of the roster, all those kinds of things. You can, on the one hand, recognize that maybe the way things played out, it's like, okay, maybe a separation is going to be appropriate. That's not the same thing as saying this team is going to be better now that there's a separation. Like, those are very different things. And I think the former is true at this point. But it's also true that, for the Cubs internally to match what they had, you'd have to assume that Seiya Suzuki is going to have a great season next year as a right fielder. and you're going to have to assume one or both of Moises Ballesteros and Owen Casey can be the DH and produce at least at Seiya Suzuki's clip. Like, and I know that they have that potential. And so this was another thing we were talking about, that it is possible that the Cubs could simply be better internally. Just like of course that's possible. These are good young players, but it's not probable. And when you are planning your team and you have the opportunity of an offseason to make your team what you want it to be, you don't ride on possibility. You try to create probability.
You actually just made me realize a point too. There's two ways to think about that. There's possible or probable better than last year, but that's not really the question. It's what if Kyle Tucker's healthy all of next year? Then are they going to be possible or probable better than what you would have been? And that's almost, you know what?
They didn't only have him for one more year though. So that, like, to me, then that gets into the discourse about like, okay, well, having Tucker for 2026 means $300 million contract or whatever.
Sure.
And that means other impacts on the roster in ways that, because that's the other thing to keep in mind on this for 2026 alone, even if you wanted it to be, and say Tucker's salary for 2026 is $35 million or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
If the Cubs don't have him, they don't have that player, but they do in theory have $35 million that they can deploy elsewhere to try to make up for it, especially since the guys who would be replacing him internally are pre-arb guys.
Right. Yeah. I mean, okay, but there's a good question. So I would assume that, to whatever anyone thinks, here's what's probably true behind the scenes. When the Cubs traded for Kyle Tucker, they knew it might only be a one season thing. But if you think that they weren't thinking about an extension at all, I think you're wrong. I think they're probably like, listen, at a minimum, we're going to be able to offer him, I'm making up $250 million. I'm going really on the lower end. Do you think that's sort of, if that has changed, if they have changed their mind on their willingness to even make an offer, let's say, which again, I don't know if it's going to be completely absent from that conversation, but are we talking about a Tanaka rollover fund situation? We had that money earmarked and now it's gone. It's because this is different than Shohei Ohtani, which is, I understood the arguments you made and I agree with them. That when they made him an offer that was $450 million, I don't know, whatever it was. They were involved at some level, right? That you don't just go and hand out that money to anyone else because Shohei Ohtani is his own enterprise.
He creates
Kyle
money.
Tucker's not that. So if you were like, hey, we generally think we can budget for this, is it a little bit more like, well, listen, maybe we're not going to 100%, but we can go up to 80% of that money that we were going to spend otherwise?
I think their answer would be the budget was going to be the budget for the next 5, 6, when they're
you think
out.
that wasn't going to push them over in any way? No. And they were just,
I think the opposite. I think it was if and when they had signed Tucker, it was going to be, well, that's a big chunk now that's eaten up and we're going to have to, and there is the way, my understanding is the way the budget is projected out. It's not finalized for a given year until like the fall right before. And then it's projected out in bands, where it's like, here's the range that we think the revenue is going to be. Now you sign Tucker long-term, you might bump those bands slightly because you're like,
sure,
we might be a better team. We might sell a little more merch. We might, whatever. But I don't think there was going to be some Kyle Tucker allocation, I don't think,
right.
I think more it's how you set it up originally, which is when they traded for him, they thought, well, you never know how things are going to play out. Maybe it plays out in a way that he ends up having to take a deal that we're like, yeah, we would sign that within our budget, $250 million, 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And the way things played out, I don't think that's changed. I think they would still explore the whatever level of deal they already had thought was like, oh, here's where our comfort zone is. I just think they would have said, we thought it was more likely he was going to have another monster year and price himself out.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's hilarious that there is the outcome where he has a monster year and prices himself out of the Cubs range. And there's an outcome where he has such an injury riddled season and priced himself under the Cubs range of interest. And it's like, so what was the version of this that you kept him? And there was none.
I think it was kind of like the season that we just had, but he's so loves Chicago.
Yeah.
And the fans love him so much. Like everyone's like, we've got to make this work.
Yeah, and then I guess.
And that just didn't happen.
Although what you said was true too, but at the same time, I keep forgetting that the payroll is coming down. Not the payroll level. The amount of money that the Cubs have committed for next year is going to be lower heading into the offseason. And then in 2027,
and by the way,
especially,
we let them off the hook a lot. They were like 10 million under the luxury tax this year. Yeah. So it was already, in my view, artificially low.
Yeah, I think that was probably what they were just saving for the deadline, right?
Yeah,
and they just didn't do anything.
Totally right. But I mean, my point only is it's coming down this offseason from a level that's already lower than where I think they should be annually.
Sure. There's also, I wonder like if there's going to be so many people are concerned about the changes to the CBA, and I'd have to go back and look at this affecting, you need maximum flexibility heading in. And I've said this 1,000 times, the Cubs are going to be so freaking low in their payroll in 2027 that there's almost nothing conceivable that they can do anywhere within the realm of their expectations that will make this an issue. However, even for the teams that it is true, do we think that there won't be even like a grandfathering in season or something? Like if there's a cap, there absolutely has to be something.
Yeah. They're
not going to just make the Dodgers trade away 10 guys because they're at 400 million. Like there's no way. So
I think there'd be a phasing, multi-year phasing, but like, I am not actually sure that to your specific point there, I'm not actually sure that the answer wouldn't be, yeah, actually the Dodgers would have to figure that out. If there was a hard cap at like 350 million, which that's very high, right? And they're at 360. Yeah, I could envision a world where it's like, yeah, sorry, no, you actually have to. What I don't know about the capped leagues, right? Like say the NFL, because the NBA one does have like it's almost like my understanding, I'm not an NBA guy. My understanding is it's like a hyper extreme luxury tax type situation where it's like there's a cap, but you can play.
Well, there's also like rules about
who you can acquire. But in the NFL, my understanding is it's a hard cap. How's that like? I guess here's the problem. It was never new. It's not like it doesn't kick in.
That's true. They also have that restructuring of contracts thing that is part and parcel of NFL.
Oh,
life.
Maybe that's what it would be is like, hey, you've got to come below this new hard cap. So you're going to figure out restructuring with guys to make that happen.
The players union.
Well, you got to make it worth their while.
But it blows my mind, honestly, even when some NFL players do it. Cause I'm sure that there's aspects of it that we don't know, but sometimes you read those articles, you're like, so you're just deferring your
You mean like
salary?
Half of the Dodgers contracts already are ridiculous and not player friendly at all, but somehow even their own representatives are like, yeah, this is actually a great deal because I get to tell the world I just negotiated a $500 million deal for you, even though it's only worth $300 million.
I don't understand that. I also saw someone recently say that Shohei Ohtani's deal was the largest in history. I was like, well, no, Juan Soto's was like
not even close to
significantly, definitely better. So I don't know.
It's because look, and I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just saying financial literacy in, I don't know, among everyone is like lower than it should be. And that's, I think, a big factor.
You would think that it's so hard because the agents, you think their best interest is getting the best deal for their player, but the actual best interest, their own best interest is getting the best perception of the best deal for their player.
Exactly.
And that's the distinction that matters.
Exactly.
So
exactly. There's not whatever. I'm not casting aspersions on agents, but like, it's not like they're going to put out a press release that says, we just secured a $400 million deal for Shohei Ohtani. It's got a bunch of deferrals in there but this is the real value. It's 400. No, they're going to say, we just got the biggest contract in the history of the universe and it's $700 million. no asterisks, nothing.
To be honest, his deal looks pretty good now.
What? It's the cheapest deal in sports. I hate it. And I think about it.
Let me rephrase that. Forget deferrals. Let's say he got 10 years and $460 million.
I'll do you one better. Say he got 10 years and $700 million. It's still an absolute steal because do you know how much they're making on him annually? I've seen $100 million. And like, that's not even the player performance. That's how much he brings in the door.
If that's true though, if they're making $100 million, they're profiting off of him existing.
Yes.
Then why wouldn't any team? They should be willing to pay him $100 million a year, and then you're neutral.
They didn't have to. Well, because two reasons. One, because I don't think we knew that it was going to be that much. I saw projections before he signed it. It was like 50 million. Yeah. I think it's just been even more. And then two,
LA.
Yeah, there's unique value there that wouldn't be captured other places. You know, if he's in Tampa right now, I don't think he's generating $100 million.
But I could imagine the Mariners or the
for
Giants.
Sure there are. Yeah. The Yankees.
Maybe New York. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's move to the
the next,
because this will be part and parcel with all that we've talked about already.
Okay, this week's next segment is called When I Find My Ad Read. Here it is. Oh, I knew who it was. Do you know who this segment is brought to you by, Brett?
I assume it's not the game, but I assume it's still our wonderful Feldco sponsors.
Yeah, they're the home renewal experts, and we are proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned and prides themselves in delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers a perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. I think next week and every episode going forward, I want you to give me a character or an accent, and I'll read the ad read, and that just blind. I'm like, you're going to say Jamaican and I'm going to go Irish, and I'm not going to be able to really, hopefully nothing.
I'll try to make sure. Over. Well, I'll just try to make sure that I pick the most offensive thing possible, because it's you doing.
I know you're obsessed with Italian Americans, so
the Cosa Nostra.
Yeah. Oh, you read a book.
What this thing of ours? No, basically I watched The Sopranos and Godfather. Okay, so the transaction that I wanted to talk about this week. Now remember, folks, this area is not, when we do these, I think for this offseason, it's going to be like fun discussions as opposed to necessarily like things we think are definitely going to happen for the Cubs. And so today's is Kyle Schwarber, because that's fun to talk about an old beloved player with the Cubs who's now hitting free agency. And I see out there a lot of clamoring among Cubs fans for how can we figure out how to bring him back? And so I wanted us to at least have that conversation of okay, if Cubs wanted to make this happen, what would that look like for bringing Kyle Schwarber back? And how could they make it make sense? And that's the conversation I wanted to have.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting because on the one hand, when I'm looking at Kyle Schwarber's stats from this year, he slashed 240, 365, 563, which was a 152 weighted runs created plus, by far his best. But last year he took a step up. It was 134. That was a big difference. And then in 2021, his first year out of the Cubs organization, he had a 145. But there's definitely a difference these last 4 seasons where he's hitting 40 plus homers, 50 this year. That's a fundamentally different player than a guy who's just hitting 30. That's still a lot, but 30 homers and 130 versus 45 homers and 150. Meaningful difference. The question really, though, before I even get into fit and everything, I'm kind of curious what you think. Is he going to be this guy again? His average and his OBP wasn't materially better than it had been. His slugging was categorically different. I mean, it was a whole level up.
Driven in large part by the dingers.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the question ultimately is he following the David Ortiz path, where it's a guy who just, because of so you've got things fighting against each other, which is the physical aging that will slow you down. It just does. Okay. And you can fight that as best as you can. But what can and does improve for certain caliber of hitters is their plate discipline and their pitch selection and their ability to, which doesn't just mean fewer strikeouts and more walks, although it does. It can mean it keeps your power up because you are getting so much better at targeting the pitches you want in the areas you want. And so that even as your bat speed comes down a little bit, you can still do so much damage. And I think that's to your question of like, is he going to keep going on this? Few guys do, but some guys do. And that's probably the question that teams are going to be asking themselves this offseason. If you believed he was going to go that David Ortiz route and essentially be just as good at 38 as he is at 33, I think you'd have a team like the Cubs even, like say they really believed that. Then I think they do have to like figure out a way, hey, we might be more right on this than other teams, and therefore we should figure out a way to make this work, even if it's going to like shock people, the kind of deal that we're going to do.
Yeah, but the frustrating part there is something we've heard from players and agents a lot lately is that everyone's offers are eerily similar because everyone's projection systems right now are identical. The Zips thing that we talked about with Swanson at the beginning, kind of like not
it's rare,
direct, but
it's rare that you'd have an outlier opinion, on a guy like Schwarber where, I don't know, everything's there. All the data is there. It would be rare.
Something that might be affected is the ballpark though, and not just the wind, but where he's, you know what I mean? Like there's a reason, Isaac Paredes and Houston, made sense, right? That's,
and Citizens
that's
Bank is a pretty homer friendly ballpark in general. I think if you wanted to make the argument, it would look a lot like things that we've talked about on this pod and talked about before, which is that, 2026 is important for the Cubs. This is a case where they do need to do one of those deals where it's like, hey, we know what we're paying over these 4 or 5 years, but we really want to get it in 2026. And because Kyle Tucker's departing, we have an opening at DH. Seiya is going to play right field. We have an opening. We can't assume that Moises or Owen are going to be great. We can use them to trade for a pitcher to like really make 2026 awesome. So like I could start to put that argument together where it actually starts to be like, whoa, wait a minute. This makes a lot of sense. And if they effectuated all those moves, we would look back at it and say, oh, brilliant the way they coordinated all this stuff. So that's what the argument would look like. And it's not crazy. It's not a crazy argument.
So first of all, let me say this. Re-signing Kyle Schwarber just in isolation, in a vacuum, boy, that would be fun. It would be fun. It would be exciting. It'd be cool.
I'd love to watch him with the Cubs again.
I would too. He's also, frankly, one of the, is this my Cubs fandom blinding me? Kyle Schwarber has become like one of the more visible faces of MLB.
I know what you mean.
And I don't know why that is necessarily. I know
he's extreme. Guys who are extreme show up a lot more in highlights and stuff. And he's just seems like I don't know. He's a fun, rowdy boy. And it's like that sort of gets,
I think that the Cubs have a little bit of a Greg Maddux situation working with Schwarber if they do get him, where it's like all of his best years were actually in Atlanta and we just got him at the beginning and the end. And it's like, we claim Kyle Schwarber.
He's ours. Yeah.
But I would think it would be fun. However, I also think two things. I don't have any idea how you work Moises Ballesteros in, which is not a reason to not get Kyle Schwarber. I'm just saying they are both left-handed DHs.
Because it's not just about 2026. It's
right.
You have Mo for many years, and he'd be blocked in all of those years.
Yep. And I also tend to just believe in Moises Ballesteros. When I see him swing, I'm like, I think this but he's a very different hitter than Kyle Schwarber. And I don't think people really understand that because I think they see his build and they think he's just going to be Kyle Schwarber, but that's like not the guy he is really. But it still would be a very useful bat to have. And I just don't know if the Cubs are going to let him catch much, if at all. It's possible, I guess, but it just doesn't feel like it's headed in that direction. Maybe I'm wrong about that. And then maybe that opens up a whole lot of opportunities, right? But I don't know. Do you get that vibe? I guess we could pause there.
Did he get a single? Did he get a single inning at the big league level?
I think he got.
I think he got an inning at first base. I don't know if he got. Maybe he got an inning behind.
I think he had to come in one time.
Yeah, that might be right. But point there being, the Cubs weren't even interested in giving him like one start.
Yeah, he caught one game against the Cardinals September 28th.
Oh, that's right. Everything was decided. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So right, exactly. So that is that. And then, and I just also think that, if you go and get Kyle Schwarber, you do need to go trade Ballesteros and or Casey and or Wiggins or whatever you're doing to get someone big and good in the rotation for next year. And like, are they going to do that? I don't, it sounds like an exciting way to use your resources. And it also sounds like not a way that Jed Hoyer really operates, when he could probably look at the math and be like, yeah, Schwarber is going to hit 40 homers and Ballesteros is only going to hit 15, but Ballesteros is going to hit 280. Who knows? And get on base around the same clip next year. So we could spend no money and not even to save the money, but to spend it on something else.
Spend it on another pitcher. Yeah.
That they want, so it's like,
and ultimately
the options you're putting to Jed Hoyer is like spend your prospect capital and spend more money, or spend less money and less prospect capital.
Right.
And if the result is close, he's not going to think about it. And
win 92 games instead of 93.
Right.
Yeah. And that's how they think about these things. And I'm not.
And that's right.
That is ultimately why I landed. When I wrote about this, that's why I landed that I just don't see the Cubs being serious pursuers. And part of this that we didn't mention, of course, is that there are other teams that aren't having to do this dance to figure out, like, how do we fit Kyle Schwarber and how does it make sense? It's just like obvious, like the Phillies, for example. And to them, it's just a matter of salary. Like, do we make him a big enough offer? And so I think you're competing against those teams. And also reunions are super rare. I'm not saying that there's like hard feelings.
What happened with Jake Arrieta?
Let me rephrase. Reunions that take place while a guy is still super desirable and has lots of options and stuff are rare.
I would like to see it. I think it would be fun. I don't know how it works. And I think it necessitates a series of moves that the Cubs are probably just not all that eager to make.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing, right? I mean, let me put it to you. We've talked about two guys so far, Bregman and Schwarber. I think the chances of getting Alex Bregman, I think the chances of Alex Bregman playing for the Cubs next year are like a great deal higher than Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, like 10x. And that's to my mind, making the fit work is easier and more obvious. And we know that this front office, for just about this team, wants Alex Bregman. Like, we already know that. So, and we know that they have a general disposition against locking in a DH. Like, we didn't talk about that part, that like they've not shown an interest in having a dedicated DH, generally speaking.
Not yet, right? In the entire era of Seiya, but
DH
that was
in the NL era. Like, they just, that's not been,
sort of. They had Seiya though, but
that wasn't. They didn't. I would argue that wasn't them saying, we're going to get Kyle Tucker because we want Seiya to DH. That's a difference. And even if we go back and look, I would say Seiya started about maybe half of the games this year at DH. The Cubs had someone else for the other half.
I think that was unplanned. I think,
but but if you get a dedicated DH, that you're not moving him around to like cover for other guys. You're like, because like Kyle Schwarber isn't sliding out to right field for
it's not happening.
The season.
Right? And for what it's worth too, comparing like Alex Bregman again, just to put a thought in there. Not only can you coordinate like with Matt Shaw better, because first of all, then you kind of have a really nice backup plan at second, short, and third between moving guys around. Like that can legitimately work. But you also do buy yourself the ability to evaluate Moises Ballesteros and Owen Casey, because one or both of them is going to play a huge role if they're not traded on the 2027 team, because Seiya and Hap are both, and Nico, but unrelated, but are both leaving. So suddenly there'll be 2 corner outfield spots and a DH spot sort of open. And if you didn't learn anything about those guys next year, it's just going to be the same question going into. And so the value of that information is something that you could only gain by buying Alex Bregman, not by buying Kyle Schwarber.
And so I think for that reason, maybe not more than anything else, but like that's a huge part of the reason I would say, even if the 2 of them get the same contract, which is, if you look at projections, they're going to be in the same ballpark. I think me making the decision, not who I think the Cubs would decide. I think I would choose Bregman over Schwarber, even if I think Schwarber's going to be offensively far more productive, which I do. And I have concerns about Bregman as he ages that weren't allayed by his season with the Red Sox. So this isn't, to be clear, this isn't me necessarily advocating for Bregman specifically. I would say Okamoto is looking more interesting to me right now as we talk about third base, but we'll get to that.
I have no idea what to expect from him, though. Just
yeah,
like
I mean,
all these guys. It's like, what are we gonna get?
Yeah, it's
like Shota 2 years ago. Even it was like,
we had no clue.
Who knew? Who knew?
No, and then what I remember, with him, you'll recall initially he's rumored to be posted, and it's like, okay, how much is he going to get? 100, 150 million, whatever. Would the Cubs really do that? And then the Cubs are serious, and then he gets like potentially as little as like 50 million. Yeah. And then I remember when that happened, I was like, oh, all right, well, it's the tail's wagging the dog. You've kind of got to be like, well, okay, so maybe he'll be like a decent 4 or 5. And then obviously he was quite a bit better than that. And what I would note there, this actually runs contrary to our point about Schwarber, where it's hard to find extreme wins in free agency because the projections are all the same and the teams work on the same models. I think with Japan, that's a big difference. I think you do still have the ability
that is fair.
Because there's so many other complicating factors when you're translating that performance to the States and a person living in the United States. And like, there's so many more human factors that can affect play. And so anyway, not to make this about that. I only meant to say, I'm not necessarily advocating Bregman. I'm just saying if they were choosing between Bregman and Schwarber, I think Bregman's the better fit for this team going forward. So that's the talk. That's the little transaction corner on Schwarber and other fun ones like that. Hit us up, by the way, if you've got sort of unlikely but interesting transaction ideas that you want to hear us talk about for the Cubs. We would love to hear it.
And Brett's phone number is 555.
It's 555. Wow. And it's got a bunch of W's at the end. Boy, I had to pay for that.
Just only 1 O?
Yeah, just 1 O. It's wow. Whoa, whoa. Yeah. Okay. You remember the Miguel Montero thing? Like it was 2 O's, right? He did WOO.
I think so.
That's woo.
Maybe that's what he was saying.
I do a lot. You could tell I do a lot of like tweets and stuff that require adding additional letters to amplify. I often think about like which letter should be the one that carries.
Oh, I know what you mean. And sometimes it feels like when you say it, it should be the vowel, but sometimes it's like the consonant right after the vowel.
Wow. Yes. Because if you do W,
that's the same thing. I wasn't even thinking of that.
Yeah. That reads as woo. And then you're like, you get to the end and you're like, oh, there's a W. When you're saying it, yeah, wow. Well, actually, the W does carry quite a bit. Wow. Aren't you glad you stayed? Yeah, aren't you glad, folks, you stayed for minute 53 of the BN Cubs podcast, so you could hear
our 30-minute BN Cubs podcast.
This is our weekly 30-minute podcast that somehow is never shy of 50 minutes anymore.
Yep.
I'm Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. Yeah, as I said, this is the BN Cubs podcast. Wow. It is brought to you by our sponsors at Ankin Law, 312-6million, injury law made personal. And we appreciate you checking us out and stick with us this offseason. I think it's, it's a different vibe in any kind of sports podcast in the offseason, but it's fun. And I think you'll get some interesting stuff from us. Wow. Including that. Thanks. Take care. Have a good weekend.